Head sculpt for use with the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom line from Spero Toys. I didn't really have any plans. I was just testing stuff out, and it was a fun project to do. So I made a mold of it, and I just kind of ran it in whatever color colors I was running that day for my Origins pieces. I took them to Zolocon and had them on my table, and I ended up having a lot of yellow ones, so I painted one. So I figured I might as well actually make a custom out of this now. So I have to paint a body yellow because there aren't any yellows, at least to this body type, in the line. So I disassembled a feral beastie figure, and now I have to figure out how to customize this thing. So disassembling it helps, like on both lines, because for example, I took the shoulder joints out, and now I can easily access the part of the butterfly joint where paint will catch right there. So I have to sand that down. I assumed this bar would come out. It didn't on mine, but it's really not that big a deal because this will be covered because I'm more likely just going to reuse this. I might repaint the blue. I'm not sure yet. That goes over the waist, and you can see it's sculpted to be like trunks anyhow, so I'm not even going to worry about painting this. That's fine. Uh, I will have to sand down here some because it will rub on this part, so give us more tooth. Hopefully the paint will catch. We'll find out. I'm going to sand out the interior here for the neck joint because it's already fairly tight as is, so I'm just going to take a Dremel bit and go around here a bit, widen that. This I'll probably mostly leave alone other than sanding down the joint disc, obviously, and around, standard stuff. Mostly nothing seems too spectacular. I could have pulled the arms apart from the pins, but I really didn't think there was a reason for that. I will definitely be sanding then the inner cuff of the wrist joint here because that's very tight, so I'll be sanding that some. Do some basic sanding here. I will be sanding probably the area here. It makes reassembly easier at the end. I could have pulled the hip joint off of here, but they fought me, and there really wasn't much point to it. I'm not going to be doing anything crazy there. It's just going to be painting this whole thing yellow more or less, and then painting the chest a different color. So I'll get my Dremel out, get working on these, and we'll see how it goes. I do have this pack of some specialty bits. These could help you a lot, and I'll use files to finish off with. So I'll come back once I get this all sanded down. Back like 2 hours later, sanding out all those parts. I did a pretty basic sand over everything, went in anywhere I thought there might be rubs. It probably would actually been easier to disassemble these joints since you have the visible pins and rip them apart and sand down the knee and elbow joints that way, but I'm not used to doing that, so I didn't. But that may be something to do in the future. Now, I'm not quite sure how this plastic type is going to take paint, so we're priming it. So I'm just using the basic surface primer from Vallejo here, just using white. After that, since I have to match this incredibly vibrant yellow, I am going to be trying to mix it where I will be using the Pro Acryl warm yellow as my base, but that is a bit too orange tone, so I'm going to have to hit it with something in a yellow-green vibe. I have some Vallejos like that. I will be mixing in a small amount of Folk Arts multi-surface yellow just because the multi-surface paint has good adhesion. And then for the skin tone, it's mostly just a mix of the Pro Acryl Dark Flesh and Orange. But once again, I will probably end up putting in some multi-surface dark brown as a base to try to promote adhesion. So I'll get this primed up. We'll see how it goes. I am not priming any joints that won't be visible. So for example, I'm not going to be priming these or this. I'm probably not going to prime the waist piece since it's sculpted to be trunks. I can just leave it orange. You won't be able to see it in the end anyways. I'm just going to leave that as is. And I'll be back to you once this is all primed. So I got everything primed for the most part, and you can do the little test to make sure everything's primed well. You can bend the joints and make sure the primer doesn't come off. I'm going to have to sand some stuff down here real quick with my file. I will get that. But as you can see, majority of the joints are now pretty much solid. There might be a few pieces I have to touch up. I have the torso ready to go. I'm not so worried about getting a super great primer on the chest because I'll be painting brown. Though I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that, see if something caught that, or if that just happened from being moved around. There shouldn't be anything to rub there, so I'm just going to assume that was something bumped it. There's that, and now I am now testing yellow mixes to match this yellow resin. That is one of the frustrating things about casting things in resin. It's really hard to get an exact paint mix sometimes. I'm getting close, but you might be able to tell it's not 100%. That has a bit more of the green mix into it than this one does. They're both off just enough. So it's two I mentioned, and I did bring in a tad of the yellow-green from the monocolor range, which is a bit too green, so I have to mess with that for a bit more. I'm going to finish cleaning up these last few joints here with the primer, make sure everything's good to go, and then I will keep doing yellow mixes until I have something I'm satisfied with and cover the whole thing in it. Alright, got the painting on him done. Like I said, not going to repaint the trunks because there's no real point. So, in the end, I said I add white to the yellow paint to really match that color. I ended up doing a dry brush with a lighter yellow on top to kind of give a little bit of depth to his fur. And the skin tone was just that brown and orange like I showed. So I'm going to get him sealed up, and then I will use a hairdryer to heat up all the plastic, reassemble them, and see how it works out. I was debating painting the, I don't want to call it skirt piece, but you know what I mean. A different shade of blue, but it didn't really take very well, and I think this will look fine on the yellow. I can always change this out later. That's not going to be that big a deal. So I'll get him assembled, and I'll be back in a few. Alright, I'm back, and it's the next day. I actually assembled them and had to pull them apart because I did not sand stuff enough. So the first things first, the discs that pop into the shoulders, you cannot get in there unless you would soak them in hot water, and you can't do that with paint on it, so I had to sand them down to more of a cone peg shape, and that works with heating them up to a degree. I had to also sand the disc down more than I did initially, but it wasn't too bad. And the biggest thing is I had to go in and I had to clear out more plastic in the inner shoulder joint. Hopefully this is enough. And I sanded down somewhat below and above the shoulder joint here. So hopefully that should do the trick. Otherwise, things seem pretty okay. I did have to sand out a little bit more around the neck because it caught here a little bit, but not too bad. So I'm going to go heat this back up. And then I will try assembling it and give it a test run to see how all the paint holds up this time. Now, if you just want to make this custom for your shelf or whatever, you don't have to do all this. You could just leave the figure entirely intact and paint it and just in a pose you want, and you're good to go. But my goal is always to retain as much articulation as possible with my customs and make them functional, because I tend to take a lot of my customs on the road with me to conventions and stuff and put them on my table as examples. I need them to hold up during traveling and then be posed and put on my table. A normal person wouldn't have to do this. I'm just a crazy person. So I'll be back in a few. Had to rip the arms out and sand them down again. This is more trouble than I expected, but I'll make this thing work. I'm not going to give up. But if you want to do an AWOC custom, you should probably find one of the shoulder joint colors you want to use to begin with. Ooh, that took a while. Got him done. That took a long time, so I had to disassemble his shoulder joints probably about 4 times total in the end to keep resanding pieces so paint rub would stop happening. Spent a whole entire day just undoing these joints over and over and over again. And I will admit the paint there is not 100% the cleanest. They need a couple more coats, but I was getting kind of sick of it. So what I have to keep doing, I have to keep pulling the shoulder joints back out, heating them up, yanking them back out, and sanding out more of the inner shoulder joint and the butterfly joint here and on top of the shoulders. Visually looks fine. It just took a lot of work. But the thing is, no matter what I did, no matter how much I removed, paint was still rubbing. And I thought, what is going on? I kept resealing it over and over again. And then I eventually realized I wasn't using the secret weapon. You gotta use the Folk Art multi-surface paints. This stuff is like the best in terms of adhesion. It's crazy. I know if you do customs, you don't want to use Folk Art paints because they're like the cheap paint. But that multi-surface stuff has crazy adhesion. So definitely get it if you're doing customs. That will solve so many problems you don't even know. I can't say it work on every single type of plastic. That's why I didn't go harder on this. But as soon as I found out it works great. Like I said, the pigment count's not great, but if you mix it with some higher pigment paints, you know, a decent mix ratio, that'll do the job for you. And it seems to hold up pretty dang good. There's a couple spots on his underarms I might need to sand down a bit more that have rubbed from using him, but it ain't bad. There's some areas that need cleaned up, but still, it's pretty good. And I really do have to give props to Spero Toys for the insane level of engineering on these figures. The tolerances on these joints are crazy. How hard it was to get this to work, but they're great figures. So I can safely say you can customize one of these guys and fully paint them. It's just going to take you some time. Sand more than you think you'll have to if you're doing this, because I can tell you that was my biggest mistake. I kept sanding not enough every single time. And I keep yanking them apart, and eventually I swapped the paints, and it finally worked. Mind you, once again, you don't have to do this. If you just want to have a nice display custom, just put them in a pose you want and paint them. That'll do the trick. But I'm a crazy person. But yeah, he poses, I'm going to say fully, to the extent a normal figure would from the line. I mean, theoretically, like we have problems here. Like I painted the wrist, and one side is the other color than the other side, unfortunately. So I might need to touch that up. There's some brown from the other side coming through there. Just some minor things that need finished on these. But for right now, I'm happy with him. He'll do the job I need him to do and just look like a nice custom I can take around and put on my table when I have this head sculpt available. So I hope this video was somewhat informative. Sorry I have no charisma and I'm awful at this, but hey, hopefully I gave you some good information. I'll pose them out and take some pictures and include them in the video here. All right, have a good one. Thanks.